Roughly 95% of students with dyslexia don't get the help they need. What if you or a loved one are one of those? I was. Hi, my name's Tim Winnicky. This is American Masculinity, and in our 16th episode, we're talking about dyslexia. I was one of those kids that didn't get what I needed. Because of it, I always thought I was bad at school, and I never read a book until I was nearly 20 years old as I went into college. I got lucky. I found some people that helped me. I found the right tools. And because of that, I found my legs academically. I earned distinguished graduate in my master's program, and I'm a college professor. The right tools matter so much. This isn't about parenting failures. It's about wrong tools and skills for the right problems. We can do better. And to figure out how to do better, we're talking to Russell von Brocklin. He's an advocate and educator around dyslexia and has a long track record of helping people in unique ways make great strides. He's going to share with us his tools for figuring out what's going on and what kind of things might help you or a loved one improve. The conversation was wonderful. I got pretty mad at points. I kept it together in the interview, but I couldn't help but thinking back to the kid I was and not getting what I needed and how that impacted me for years of my life. I hope that in hearing this and listening to this, you either change something about your view of yourself, or there's someone in your life that you can start asking new questions to figure out what it is they need. Think about those people through this episode. While you listen, think about who in your life might benefit from some of the things you're learning. And we'll talk about it at the end. Let's get the conversation started. Hey, Russell, man, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to being here.
So I just cut you off trying to tell me about how you got started in this. Would you mind telling the audience as well?
Sure. I went to law school with to audit contracts and property after college with a first grade reading and writing ability. Second day in contracts, the professor calls on me. And what they love to do is they use the Socratic method. They try to make you look like an idiot. You don't know an answer, they'll keep asking questions because they want to train you as fast as possible to answer any argument, any time, from any side. Things just slowed down. Everything came together, and I was arguing with my professor for 15 minutes. He couldn't beat me.
Nice.
I couldn't beat him. And at the end, he said, Russell, you couldn't be any more correct. He had to move on to the next case for time constraints. The students I was there doing that, when they graduated, they said they still couldn't do that. So then about 15 days later, I started taking property quizzes. I was getting the highest grade and the fastest finish out of anybody. And everything just snapped together. So then I wanted to take those skills and help other dyslexics. So my first project was I decided to bring the writing skills of highly motivated high school dyslexics, highly intelligent, going on to college, how to basically bring the writing skills up to the graduate school level. The test used for that is the Graduate Records Exam Analytical Writing Assessment. The New York State funded this. New York State Senate funded this. So what happened is we took classes about five or six per grade, per time, and these kids had middle school writing skills. They were not going to be able to go to college. One class period a day for the school year. At the end of that, they're writing average or above average of entering graduate students. They jumped 7 to 8 grade levels in 1 year. Spelling and grammar went from atrocious to clean at the graduate level. They all went to college, no accommodations, graduated with 2.5 to 3.6 GPA, and it cost the state less than $900 a student.
Can't beat that.
Yeah, nothing's ever been close to that. Problem was we needed to move it over to everybody. And especially since dyslexia is perceived to be mostly for young boys, it's boys and girls, but boys are diagnosed much more often. So we had to drop it to everybody. And what I did is I took the research from this book from Yale, and it shows the back part of the dyslexic brain has almost no neuroactivity. The front part's 2.5 times overactive, and that deals with articulation and word analysis. So I switched it around to word analysis followed by articulation, but that would not work still because these kids had typical motivation, not the awesome, I'll do anything you ask for, super motivation of the first group. So to get them involved, I talked to successful dyslexic professors, and from those interviews, I pulled out 2 main points. Number one, you absolutely have to focus on the dyslexic students' speciality, their area of extreme interest and ability. You step outside of that, you're down 80% for most kids. Why is that? Because dyslexics, we want to specialize in our narrow little area that we're really good at. But our school system wants to make us well-rounded until we can specialize near the end of college, and especially in grad school. So most of us don't make it that far. The second thing was, and this was so overwhelming, is that dyslexics are much better. We can't learn from this general to the specific, but we can learn from the specific to the general. Why is that? You ask a student in their speciality, do they have ideas flying around their head at light speed but with little to no organization? They're going to say yes. It's like, okay, so we have to organize the brain. Secondly, for severe dyslexia, I'll say fingers, keyboard, fingers, keyboard. You have something you want to say, you put your fingers on the keyboard, then the idea flies out of your head, leaving you with an empty brain. How can you write with an empty head? What we had to do was that showed that we really had to focus on something very specific, get an anchor point, and then go out in a linear order. So it forces us to think in a very linear step-by-step manner. And I tell them, what we're going to do is we're going to force your brain to organize itself. We're going to measure how good we are with that by using writing as a measurable output. And then I'll ask the kid, we're going to focus on a book that you're really interested in with an accompanying audiobook. Is this how you want to learn? And they'll say yes. And that gets us started. Now, especially the difference between boys and girls. Boys are caught much more often because when they get frustrated, in elementary school, it.
They get big.
Yeah. The girls will generally be much softer, more trying to be compliant, and they'll put in generally what I found, and this is completely anecdotal, reasonable more effort to try to not cause any waves. But for the boys, especially, the big problem isn't at the end of third grade, because K through 3 we learn to read, fourth and beyond we read to learn, and the blow-ups can get legendary. I've had students who were in middle school, severely dyslexic. Nobody thought of it because they worked so hard and they were getting like 85, 86 average. They're low-end honor students. And then all of a sudden, there's this explosion. They get tested, and the kid's reading at the second grade level. And they're like, how are you overcoming this? And the kid developed this elaborate, crazy way to overcome it. And that's what a lot of us do. We create our own methods as we're going. But when I'm dealing with those students, I have to tell the parents, we're not going to deal with reading and writing right away. We have to deal with just getting him grounded and back as a person, because you got one really frustrated young man here.
Yeah.
And the parents are just looking at me saying, really? I said, yes. He is very frustrated. And that's the first thing we had to start dealing with.
It's so interesting to hear you kind of talk about the timeline, because I've got a mild reading disability, but I was also a traumatized kid. The way that it played out was about fourth grade. I went from the talented and gifted pool to the kids that couldn't read because it was the 90s. Actually, this was back in the 80s. So they had no, you were either special needs or gifted. There was no acknowledgement of the scope of learning and ability that people had. And for me, it wasn't in anger. I just shut down. I just took that and okay, so I'm not good enough. And I didn't pick up a book again until college. I would just force, and like you said, we all find our own way. My thing was I had a powerful personality. And so if I wanted to learn something in a class, I could get the teacher to talk about it. And I'd make them talk about the thing I wanted to learn. I could bring the room around. And it wasn't until college where I got into some safety. I lived with a couple that both have PhDs, were incredibly supportive. But I had to go back and take a semester and a half of remedial classes to get to where I could start functioning in college.
It's hard. I mean, I went through college literally with a first grade reading and writing level. Yeah. And people ask me, how is that possible? I'll give you one of the hints I did. I would tell a professor, I'm going to plagiarize a paper. And they would look at me like, this is the scarlet letter. You can't do that. So let's say I was doing a paper on World War II. I would take a paper that was written in World War I, completely different, and I plagiarized the writing style. So if that paper did a paragraph on this, I wrote a paragraph on this. And at the end, the professor looked at that and said, the content has nothing even close to each other.
This isn't plagiarism. You're just taking a style pointer.
You're plagiarizing how this was written paragraph by paragraph. I'd never seen anything like this. You're trying to take basic organizational writing ideas, and he said, I've never seen anything like this. Your ideas were A+. Your writing was horrible. Here's your C, or here's your D. Sure. And I'd be like, thank you.
Made it.
And I would get almost 100% on every multiple choice test. And that's how I passed. How did I if I really concentrate, I could read for the briefest moments for a test. And it was very, very difficult. But I got through it. Until I went into law school, then everything just came together, and I was the top guy just right away because this is easy.
I always think of that when I'm working with those guys that don't have what they need but are bright guys. And then they get it, and everybody's surprised at what happens when they have traction. It's like they've been a high-powered car spinning on the ice, and all of a sudden somebody puts some rocks down and they just take off.
So let's take one of those guys you're talking about so I can give you some ideas on how to further it. Let's just call the guy John Doe. Tell me about John.
I'm kind of interested in the adult learners that didn't get the diagnosis early, like the 30 and 40-year-olds that decided school wasn't for them. And they've been in the trades or somewhere else where they didn't have to do much reading. And then they find out because their kid gets dyslexia that they have it.
Okay, so let's first of all...
I see this all the time.
Let's go ahead and find out if they're dyslexic. So you said you kind of went through this. I'm going to go through those two questions with you. I need you to tell me your specialities. Here's the question. It's a Saturday morning. You have nothing to do, no responsibilities. What are you going to do all day? What do you love doing? What are you good at? So for you, that would be what?
Some depends on the weekend, but probably watching some content, trying to do this better lately.
Okay, so working on your podcast. So I want you to think about it. When you're thinking about your podcast and how to improve it, do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed? Key question, but with little to no organization.
No.
Did that ever happen to you at any time in your life?
No.
Okay. Guess what? That gets rid of
dyslexia.
That gets rid of ADD, ADHD, or mild dyslexia. I'm just going to ask you the second question. When you ever think about how to improve your podcast, fingers, keyboard, fingers, keyboard. The idea's in your head. You take your fingers, put it on the keyboard. Does the idea fly out of your head, leaving you with an empty brain?
It doesn't go away. Like I can get it down, but
no, it's in your head.
I'm not...
The idea's in your head. You put your fingers on the keyboard. Idea flies away. Empty brain. Is that you?
Oh, no.
Okay. So for your listeners, if they answered yes to the first one, it's ADD, ADHD, or mild dyslexia. It doesn't really matter. The solution is the same for all three. If they said yes to the first one and no to the second one, again, mild, it's one of those three. If they say yes to both, that's dyslexia. Now, you could go and spend $8,000 on a neuropsych. It'll give you more details, but, who wants to spend $8,000? And some people do. So now the question is, you're a grown man, you're in the trades, how do we fix this? So in our educational system now, a lot of people, if they're going to go into the trades, they'll go to a 2-year community college, and they need to learn how to write a basic 5-paragraph essay. Why a 5-paragraph essay? Because when you're you're in the trades, and you're on a site and there's a problem, you need to communicate this, and that's, again, typically your basic 5-paragraph essay. Introduction, conclusion, 2 points that are problems, 3 points, whatever it is, and you write a paragraph per point. How do you learn that as an adult? If you want to go with the traditional method, there's a place called Landmark College. Absolutely fantastic. Take you about 2 to 4 years. One of the most expensive colleges in the country, and they'll show you how to fix everything. People can't take 2 to 4 years off. They don't have the price of a house to pay for it. So how do we go about doing it? There's a book called The Craft of Research. Are you familiar with it?
I am not.
Okay. It was published in 95 by the University of Chicago because their PhD students didn't know how to write advanced research papers. What they came up with was a 3-step concept: context, problem, solution. Okay? Mm-hmm. But for most, if you're in the trades and for most adults, context and problems will fix it. Mm-hmm. So how do we go about fixing this? Now, the guys you're talking about, can they read it all? Can they write it all? Or where are they?
Yeah, for the guys that I'm talking to, it's usually more the shame and frustration around it. I got really lucky, and I had people that saw me and helped me shake that off. Okay. But when you're convinced so young that you're bad at school, mm-hmm. it's really hard to shake off that you shouldn't be doing that kind of learning later on. And so a lot of the guys I work with, they got their kid. They want better for their kid. That's why they show up. The kid gets into schools having problems like them. The kid gets the diagnosis, and the person that did the testing looks at them and says, well, if it quacks like a duck and makes ducks, you might want to get tested.
Yep. Okay.
Right?
Can these guys read it all? Can they? What's the reading level? What's the writing level generally?
So I'm not the one testing the reading levels, but I've never had one that couldn't make it through my fairly involved paperwork. Like they could get through
Okay.
the assessments okay, and they usually even would put down a word or two if there was a fill-in question.
Okay. Can they write a basic 5-paragraph essay?
Probably not.
Okay. So I'm just going to tell you the solution pretty quickly. The other ideas out there will take literally months to explain it. This takes minutes. Remember what I said? We have to force the brain to organize itself using writing as a measurable output. So what I'll have, and with my process, the older you are, the quicker you pick it up. The exact opposite with a traditional method. So I'll ask the parents that you're talking about. I'll say, okay, here's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to start off with a simple sentence. It's based on a hero, a universal theme, and an ultimate villain. Why a universal theme? Because once you understand a universal theme, you can discuss things endlessly. So, for example, do you like movies?
Of course.
Give me a name of a movie that everybody knows that's one of your all-time favorites.
The Matrix.
What's the universal theme of The Matrix?
Oh man.
Yeah, that's a hard question.
I should be able to answer that question after all these years.
How about self-determination?
I think that's a good one.
Okay.
Self-determination, or that, punching robots is cool.
Right. But if you now think about self-determination, you can now discuss it in that context. It just focuses everything. Dyslexia is we think so quickly. Remember, little to no organization. So we have to work through universal themes. So say, take a hero. A hero wants to do something. Write out a sentence. What does a hero like to do? And they'll write out a sentence, paragraph, whatever. Then you're going to look for two types of words. Remember, we're starting off with the front part of the brain, word analysis first. So we're looking for an action word that'll take a hero in the general direction they want to go, and the most important word. You find those, figure out which way you want to go. That's the start of word analysis. Then that's your base universal theme. Next step, we go to the thesaurus, depending if you want to do 5 synonyms, 10, multiple levels. Type out the word, type out the definition, and find the one that best matches what's in your head. So when you start off doing it, it's going to be very broad. And then you're going to find one that's much more narrow that best fits in your head. By typing out the word and typing out the definition from Merriam-Webster's online dictionary, not cut and paste, you got to type it out. Over time, as you practice this, you're going to develop a vocabulary of hundreds of evolved words.
Yeah, you need to put in the reps.
Right, but it's exactly like putting in the reps. I don't know if you have to type out the same word or definition 2 times, 10 times, 50 times. Eventually, you're going to get it. And the kids that I do this, the boys that are 10, 11, by the time they take the SATs at 16 or 17, the vocabulary section is just a vocabulary test. They remember 70 to 80% of the definitions all those years later. So then you have your post-universal theme. Then we pick an ultimate villain, person or a concept that could best be there to prevent the hero from accomplishing their goal.
Sure.
We separate those by
The
plus
Matrix.
signs. Ask them to read it out loud without the plus signs. Does it sound correct? No. The plus signs tell you to basically move the words around or fill in something so it sounds correct. You come up with 3 reasons. I try to have guys do this from books. Find a book that you like. Do this with a hero from the book. All right. Get an accompanying audio book that you like the narrator. Then what you do is you come up with 3 good reasons. Each reason you look at it and say, what's a basic universal theme for this? So you can go and find a quote. Once you find the quote, you answer who, what, when, where, how, why, based on that quote. We separate that with plus signs. I have you reorganize it. Does it sound generally correct when you read it out loud? No. Add words, subtract words, move it around until you got a basic paragraph. This is just going to get you to about the 5th grade level with all 3 reasons. The next one, once you get that down, because what this allows you to do is once you're in the body paragraphs and things just aren't working, there's grammar problems, spelling problems, you can then work on it in there, be shown how to correct it. Because you're working with the front part of your brain so much, it's a lot easier to learn. Practice that until you get it. Honestly, for a lot of guys, if you're in a committed relationship with whoever that is, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your whoever you're in a committed relationship with, ask them for help. You would be surprised. They're not going to look down at you because of this. They're going to be looking up to you because you're finally They knew that there was some sort of issue, but now you're working towards it. And that really
Yeah.
helps in the relationship category.
I've never had a guy who comes in, like the John Doe we're talking
Mhm.
about, the guy with the kid that figured it out that way.
Mhm.
I've never had one of those guys not have spousal support. And a few of them even got it from exes. You know, they're
Mhm.
doing the co-parenting and they're apart, but your kid learning and figuring out how to help them, everybody involved is going to want to jump on helping you do that better.
Exactly. But remember I said that's going to leave you at the fifth grade level? Here's the
Sure.
final step to make it. I said this will get you through middle school through college. Once you get done with that, you're going to want to take those body paragraphs and condense it down to the context, which is a medium to a long sentence, not a run on sentence, but a medium to long sentence. And you're going to look at, you got the quote, you got who, what, when, where, how, why. Are some of these not needed, like when or where? If they're not really needed, just get rid of those and then condense it down to one sentence, one medium to long sentence. Take some practice. You still need some help. The ChatGPT is really good at helping you do that with practice, but you got to do it on your own eventually.
Well,
Then,
so let's say that a guy's trying to do this.
Mhm.
Is there a set of prompts they can put into ChatGPT? They're going to help keep them on track?
ChatGPT changes all the time. People say we need to learn prompt engineering. I said, well, no, because every model it goes out the window. You need to prompt engineer your mind. So all you're simply doing is taking like a body paragraph or the three
Mhm.
paragraphs and put it into a one medium to long sentence context. So if you ask ChatGPT for some help how to do that, how you do that is you have the quote and you got who, what, when, where, how, why. If any of those
Mhm.
questions are not really relevant, just check them out. Check out that
Yeah.
information and then work with it to summarize it. And it's intuitive. It's easy enough to do that even with the free version.
Well, and once you're going, right, like I like how it takes the expansiveness of, that kind of specificity that you
Mm-hmm.
talked about, where I'm really interested in this, but I can write about it forever, and helping them use that to narrow it in and get what I would call clean writing,
Right,
right?
but we're not
Where
we're not looking at clean writing. This next part is pure cognitive. Okay,
okay,
so
so this is just mostly in your head.
you're trying to organize your thinking and
Hmm.
generate ideas. So this is where you don't want to worry about you just don't want to be making like run-on sentences or obviously crazy things. So you get down to the context. It's a medium or long sentence. Then you take the context, and there's a problem. That's a short to medium sentence. ChatGPT can help you with that until there's a theory from a book called Strategies for Struggling Writers by Professor Collins. It says have the
Hmm.
tutor almost do it for you and then give you less and less support as you learn how to do it. So
Yeah.
ChatGPT can play tutor for you so you don't have to hire somebody. Once you
Yeah.
get that down to a problem, short to medium sentence, see how we're getting more and more concise? You're going to want to
Hmm.
change that, take the problem and put it into a one word universal theme. And as I just showed you with the matrix, this isn't easy. You may have ChatGPT do it for you initially. You want to keep practicing this until you can come up with a good universal theme at least half the time. And then
Hmm.
the final thing, you take the context and you look at the universal theme as a lens, and you look at the context through the lens, and you come up with three good solutions. Now, those three good
Hmm.
solutions aren't going to be innovative. They're going to be what you would expect from a well-read person for whatever age group you are, whatever your intelligence level is, whatever your educational level. You put those together, and those responses will be pretty obvious solutions that you come up. And
Hmm.
then we use that as a basis for writing the more evolved paragraphs.
Hmm.
Okay, but that simple process, that's the same thing you do with your kids. Now we have some basic sentences to do with the kids before that to make sure that if they can't write C spot run, that's we have to be able to put all this together. But that's basically the meat of the situation. And what happens is as you practice that, I've had students who just mastered those skills, and it got them through. I can't believe they accepted this, but that got them through a 4-year college. The last
Yeah.
part, the innovation, the coming up with a solution, quite a bit more complicated. But unless if you're going on for an for a college graduate position or grad school, you don't really need that.
Well, it's hard to fail folks out of college these days. Like as a professor, I can tell you, like giving somebody a bad grade even when they've earned it is difficult.
Well, what I was told by professors is until if if you're a student who honestly wants to go to a four-year college, here's some statistics for you. There are 2 million fewer traditional four-year college students now than there were in 2019. The kids are going into the trades. Why?
Yeah.
They can make more money. They're not going to have a mortgage of a house payment when they're done. And literally and I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying this is what it is. With Trump's tariff policies, that's putting companies right now where they say we don't have certainty, so we don't want to do anything. So they're stopping, and they're seeing how much the AI, which has just exploded in the last couple of months, how effective that can be to not needing people.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many good college graduates. I'm talking about engineers, science, really good kids who last year people were running to get them, and these kids can't get a job.
They can't get through the door. Yeah, I've got a family member who works at Microsoft fairly high up, and his kid went through Washington State's computer program, which has been a feeder program for Microsoft forever. Couldn't get her an internship. And that's with like family on the inside of the company. It's a rough time right now. And so one, like I think respect for the trades has been lacking for 30 years, and it's terrible. And two, I'm hoping that these kinds of things cross over. Like I remember we were coming at some of the local high schools because they were sending us kids who couldn't read. And the trade schools joined us. They're like, you keep sending them to us not being able to read. Have you seen our manuals? Do you understand what the trades involve now? You cannot get through a trade school without like a basic reading level.
Oh,
everything's too complex.
I'll give you an example. My second student, his name was Adam. His teacher said this kid is a genius of geniuses. Mm-hmm. He was a 19-year-old college senior, failed the English Regents with a 47 and a 52. Took him through that original program. He ended up with a scoring of the 70th percentile of undergraduate students. And by the way, that was graded by a SUNY distinguished professor in psychology, their highest rank. He went on and joined the trades. It was the big boilers that people have. He pulled him off from vacation. He comes out day and a half later. He's all sweaty and said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to figure this out." They said, "We've had teams on this for over a month." He could just see it in his head.
You talked about how boys are more often diagnosed, and there's not a distinct gender difference in how often people are struggling with this. It's just because boys are easy to find. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, as a general rule, that's what you're finding. Girls are getting diagnosed much easier now because, honestly, if you just go to Google and type in Yale dyslexia, they have a test that is very inexpensive, takes a matter of minutes, with over a 90% accuracy rate.
Yeah, and that's enough to get you through the door if you need the bigger one for accommodations or something.
Well, no, but literally what a lot of school districts are doing is in kindergarten, they just test everybody. It's not that expensive.
That's fantastic that they're doing that so early and it's so reliable.
Well, here's what you need. This is what parents need to understand. And I'm talking about the legal system now. If a school did that in kindergarten, first grade, and then they're like, "Oh, you're dyslexic," and then they implement, just go to Yale. Again, this is K3. I don't fight with Yale on K3. They have all these programs that are $1 million+ federal funded, top science you can imagine. If the school implemented that, and at the end of third grade they failed the English, their reading writing test, because remember K3 you learn to read, fourth and above you read to learn. So if you fail that third grade test, it's 911 emergency. You sue the school district and goes to the federal court, and the school goes, "Listen, Judge, we tested the kid in kindergarten, first grade. We implemented what Yale said. We're close. They're not there yet, and we're going to do this other intervention." The judge will almost always say, "Parents, the school is doing their job. Let them go. We'll see where we are in 12 months." But if they did nothing, and now it's fourth grade, we had that happen in New York State. The senator's name was Senator Hoylman. His daughter was in fourth grade when they found out, and they told him, and this is very public, they told him, if you did this kindergarten, first grade, it's not that hard of a fix. Now in fourth grade, it's a $75,000 a year private school. Her evaluation was $8,000. His family can afford it. But because of
Almost
that,
can't.
they did a whole statewide task force on how to change K through 5. 100 of the top people in the state from all across specialities, parents, dyslexics, teachers, researchers, and they came up with a report, and now they had implementations. What they were going to essentially do is if there's dyslexia, because they're tested, they get an additional 45 minutes a day of science-based education in addition to what they're currently getting until it's fixed. Guess what the education committee in both houses said? We can't afford this. So they passed a $250,000 supplement to try something this year, of which so of that, there's a small part of that is available for like teacher training and everything. Guess who's going to be trying to use that to solve the problem anyway?
It boggles me. I was taking a class for, my original thought was I was going to go be a school counselor because I'd just gotten out of the military and I was like, I know how to bark at teenagers. Maybe I'll go do that for a living. And I took one school counseling class and realized it wasn't going to be for me. But one of the things that I learned in the class stuck with me, where the professor, he's a great guy. He was talking about how we've misappropriated education funding. He's like, I'm teaching grad students and I'm a good teacher and I do my job well, but I could literally hand you the textbook and expect you to learn it. And we screened you to make sure that you could. My job doesn't have to be hard. I make 3 times as much as somebody who's working with a 3-year-old whose brain is developing at the speed of light and arguably needs the most specialized support in whatever their learning style is to set them up well. Our system is entirely upside down.
What state are you in?
Colorado.
Okay. I'm in New York. We're the highest tax state in the country. Sorry, California, we beat you. What I can tell you is in my state, the teachers, especially in the public schools, are very well paid. The private dyslexic schools, where it's 75 grand a year, those teachers make a fraction less, much less.
Yeah. No, I've worked with teachers that have moved to New York.
Yeah.
From Colorado because of that. Like they can't make a living here, but they can make a living there.
Oh yeah. I actually had a friend in college who is kind of an interesting dude. He's very conservative, but he's a militant union member because he went into teaching for the money.
People are always going to be a little self-motivated, right? We know that there's no distinction between boys and girls. Is there any data on non-binary folks? Or I wouldn't imagine there's much going on there.
Because honestly, I haven't looked at it because I rarely run across that. Or simply I don't ask. Fair. My job is to work with the dyslexic. To me, it's the dyslexic brain. And if you're gay, straight, binary, trans, that doesn't interest me. The fact is that you're a dyslexic brain. That's what interests me, and that's what I focus on.
So for you, right? This is your specialty, and you know how to find it. My concern is, for instance, right? I'm a licensed clinician. I'm pretty good at my job, but I work primarily with men. My ex-wife has ADD and got an adult diagnosis. I thought she was anxious. I'm a clinician. I've been trained. But women with ADD look different. Like you were saying, the boys get angry, they act out, people look. Girls, they shut down, they get quiet, and they just look like they're anxious. And so for me, it's a visibility issue. And part of this is having these conversations to help people recognize that just do the simple test that exists now for any kid at all, so that we can get ahead of this. So they don't have happen what happened to you and me back in the 80s.
Yeah. So those 2 questions that I gave you, that is to give you a general idea what it probably is. One thing I can say in New York is they just, again, because of what happened to Senator Hoylman's daughter, they passed something where if you think your kid's dyslexic, if you want to go about it smart, go to your pediatrician. If they say, yes, I think this kid is dyslexic, insurance companies now have to pay up to $5,000 for a neuropsych.
Good.
That's a PhD with a lot of additional training that gives you the best evaluation possible. So I didn't get mine until I was in my 20s.
I never did one, but it wasn't required for me. I got pretty lucky. Since I started at the community college was a lot better at integrating your high school needs. And then that got me into the university where I didn't need to go get the test. They just scaled everything up for me. Plus, I just had a really good advocate. If I needed extra time, I got it. I just don't think many people are that lucky.
You have to advocate for yourself, but especially when you're dealing with a disability office, because a lot of them, like for example, it's about 20 years ago, they had this amazing specialist at SUNY Albany, State University of New York at Albany.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd go in and she would say, give me all your classes. She would outline what you need to do, take her less than an hour. And then for the next week, you had your 20 to 30 hours of homework. And you just followed that and everything was fine. Okay, now because of the budget cutbacks, they're going in, they're taking the evaluation, seeing what it says, and giving you what it says. That's it. And the other thing you need to understand is when you're in high school or K through 12, if the school really screwed up, an accommodation might be an $80,000 a year private school. The moment you step onto a college, you'll have trouble getting a $50 accommodation. It's two
Yep.
completely different sets of laws.
Yeah, you're always better, like you were talking about, right? The earlier we catch struggles, the easier it is to treat them in most cases. And people are always more patient giving funding to children than they are adults, even young adults. The one exception we had is when I was doing veteran transition work. So before I was a therapist, when I was in grad school, I worked as a peer support mentor, and I built out a program. And so our job was to run around campus making sure all the resources lined up for vets. And unsurprisingly, guys who chose the military instead of college the first time have a lot of learning disabilities. I know everybody's blown away that happens. And so we got pretty close with the accommodations office, and we were able to get extra funding and visibility because people were more willing to help a veteran.
Oh, much more so. But also when you're talking about that specific population, what a lot of because I had some clients that have gone into the military, and what they've generally, they pretty much said the same thing if they're going in enlisted. The reason why they're doing it is they're saying, listen, I'm not college material yet. I'm a screw up in some way. I'm not taking advantage of things. I'm not doing. There's something wrong with me mentally.
Structure.
I need to grow up. And what generations of older men will tell them, you go in the military, they will straighten you out. For me personally, this is one of the stupidest decisions I ever did in my life. I had a scoutmaster that went to West Point and taught at West Point.
Oh, wow.
He finished up as the chair. His name was Tom Russo. He finished up as the chair of the math department at Siena College. He invited me up because I was an Eagle, and my congressman at that year was Gerald Sullivan, very conservative guy. He only wrote recommendations for Eagles. West Point was available. I went up. I could get the congressional appointment, which is by far the hardest thing. And I looked at it, and I started talking to some cadets, and because my scoutmaster was with me, they would be much more open to a former graduate and former teacher. And they said, I'm like, why are you walking on the road and not the sidewalk? He said, well, I haven't earned the right yet. That's for upperclassmen. And me being this 18-year-old bozo said, well, if I can't walk on the sidewalk, I'm not going here. Stupid. That could have saved me 10 years of being an immature person to grow up.
Maybe. Not everybody grows up in the military.
Right, but they kind of drive. If you go to West Point, everybody I know that's been there, they drive out
West
the
Point is
immaturity
one
of
of
you
the
very
best-
fast.
It's one of the best educational institutions in the country. In the world.
It's harder to get into than Harvard. It's extraordinarily respected.
Yeah.
I have not spoken to anybody who went there that they said, while they may not have been happy every moment they're there because it's just so hard, they said after they've graduated, they would not be the person they are today without going there.
Yeah, they've been figuring out how to help people form up into military useful.
Oh, yeah, very.
For 100 years.
And now looking back, I can see why you're not allowed on the sidewalk until you earn it. It makes all the sense in the world now.
It's one of the things that people tend to struggle with the military dynamic is you have to learn to respect hierarchy. And as Americans, we're intrinsically uncomfortable with that. And so a lot of people, the military is not going to be for them for that. But for most folks, when you're on the inside of it, it's not as stifling as you think.
Oh,
like that's the reality.
Yeah.
But I want to, we're kind of coming up on time, and I want to make sure we leave. So we've talked a little bit about what people can do for themselves. We've talked about the adult that struggled. What about the people around them? What about the people who aren't dyslexic that are watching their kid, their husband, their wife, their loved ones struggling? What does showing up well for them look like?
The main thing that you need to do is understand just the hell this the dyslexics, especially when their kids are going through. Let me try to, if this goes over a little bit of time, I think we should go with it because this part is so important. Let me just tell you how hard it is on some dyslexics. I will tell, if I had a kid who comes to me and they're 90, 85, 90 average student, but they're really struggling with dyslexia. And let's say they're in high school. I'll tell them, I know your secret. And they will say, what do you mean? And I said, I can discuss it with you privately or I can discuss it in front of your parents. They always want to go private. And I'll say, here's what happened. Sometime around second or third grade, maybe fourth, you were told you had to pass some academic test. If you didn't, you're going to be held back. And especially for girls, it's horrible. Losing their friends. Bad for boys, horrible for girls. If you didn't pass the test. So they would get really frustrated. And with that extreme frustration, then the answer would present itself. So what happened? As they kept progressing through school, it happened so many times they've lost track of it. And it can get so bad that they think I'm a failure, I'm worthless, especially since their older brothers or younger brothers and sisters are fighting to be valedictorian. I see that all the time. And they get to telling themselves that they are so worthless that if they don't pass this test, that the frustration gets clinically dangerous. And then eventually the solution presents itself. It's what I like to call controlled frustration, where increasing frustration done correctly can increase performance. So I do not like to use that often and only with adults and very specific needs. But the amount of pressure these kids are under, and they always say, oh, how did you know that? Nobody knows that. No, don't ever tell my parents. I mean, they're terrified of it.
Yeah.
These kids are put under so much pressure. So what can you do? Don't yell at them. It's not a behavioral problem. Sit back, try to be supportive, and those two questions that I gave you, focus on that. See where this is. Is this a mild case? Is this a severe case? And then once you figure that out, what I was telling you about that process that we went over earlier, we extend that process so you learn how to do that. That'll bring their writing level up so they can get through middle high school, maybe most of college. It's that simple.
So patience, unsurprisingly, some curiosity with some aim, and then resourcing, like helping people get to the right tools.
Right. So
that's what a loved one can do.
Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, you can visit me at dyslexiaclasses.com. There's a form you can fill out where I can get right back to you and answer your question. But it really is that simple. So for example, remember I told you about how to come up with something original to say? I want you to imagine this. It's English class. You got 20 students. They're doing Shakespeare. The teacher's been teaching it for 25 years. What's the chance of the teacher learning something original from a high school kid?
Next to nil.
What if I told you every kid in that class, let's say they're 25, the teacher could learn something moderately original from every one of them?
I'd be impressed.
That's been reduced to a formula. The whole thing from beginning to that point is less than 20,000 words. And one of the primary things I do is train parents to train their kids how to do this, because let's face it, these private schools, I just had a member of my networking group in New York City ask about pricing for a certified Orton Gillingham instructor. That's what Bill Gates would use. $325 an hour. Yeah. Multiple hours a week. They start in middle school. They're in grad school. They're still there with them.
It's been interesting just looking at the progression of kind of mental health and learning disability support. Is we're getting more and more knowledge. So this level of specialization is going down, right? So the average age of a psychiatrist is 57 right now, because people aren't going to become psychiatrists. They're becoming nurse practitioners. As we get more and more specialized, and as we get more and more effective things we can operationalize, it's a beautiful thing. Like half of my job is knowing what the operationalization of your problem is, depending on if it's anxiety, depression, PTSD, whatever. It's giving you a framework to operate in with kindness. It's going to be interesting as we keep seeing this move forward, right? Because those people that are charging $300 an hour, there's a reason for it. They worked really hard to learn what they learned, to do what they did, and they can charge for it. But the next generation of folks coming up probably aren't going to be able to need to do that.
Well, actually, just again, that's a very special high-end market in New York City of parents
Mm-hmm.
of who are Wall Streeters who make millions a year
Well,
after
and it's New
tax.
York City, man. You got to
Yeah.
make a living wage. And I'm not mad at anybody charging $300 an hour for anything trying to live in New York.
Oh yeah, it's the, but I'm just saying that's the high end of the market. It's still to just to get that Orton certification. It's a 4-year degree,
Mm-hmm.
2 years of full time study, cost 11,000 on a non for profit. Then you have to go and you want years of experience before you start charging that.
Yeah.
But it's I had moms go through that before I started working with them because that was the only thing that worked. And I said, oh, I can show you how to do all of that. I mean, I can train teachers how to do all this
Yeah.
in like 2 days.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Once you get something down into a system, it can really help. And it's not that those specialists aren't required for some folks.
Mm-hmm.
It's just most people with a problem set, that problem becomes less of a problem once you understand what your normal is how I always frame it, right? The way you think is normal for you.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to figure out how to get the rest of the world on board.
Yeah, and it's that's why I like coming as a guest on a podcast to let them know, okay, look at this. Came out 22 years ago, and people aren't taking advantage of this science. Here's one thing that'll shock you that Orton.
It's because people don't know.
Oh no, this is the number one book in my field. You go to Amazon, this is
Mm-hmm.
number one. But you look at Orton Gillingham, that's what gets. Orton passed away in 1948. Gillingham sometime in the 1950s, and it had some decent changes going forward, but it's still basically that system. But now that we know what's going on with the brain, we can do things so much more efficiently.
Yeah.
But my field
Yeah,
is stuck in
really.
the 1950s.
I'm really pumped up about the idea of if we can ever get to the point where I can put a hat on you and take an MRI of your brain to diagnose you. I'm hoping that happens in my lifetime. I am so excited about that.
Oh, we already have that.
It's gonna be awesome.
When I was that program I was telling you about, New York State paid Dr. Holichka, a SUNY distinguished professor, to work with me for 20 hours of testing. 20 hours. Nice. And she found that there are 5 areas of the brain. Mine are really abnormal in all 5.
This is the beauty of your normal not lining up with everybody else's. You're going to come up with a new idea.
Oh, I had to. It's what you'd say
and that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of diversity. It's why we're moving away from calling learning disabilities and just calling it like one of my friends calls it neurospicy, and I think that's my favorite term for it these days.
That's a good one. They're calling it learning difference, but here's what I'd like to say to the school system. I said the central issue is we want to specialize in a very specific area immediately. You are forcing us to become well-rounded before we can specialize. You're the problem. Let us specialize in what we want to play with. Because I'll give you a little hint right now. You're a psychologist, right?
Counselor.
Oh, you're a counselor. Okay. People don't care if you can do advanced math. So if we can, what I'm trying to tell the educators, let the kids focus as much as possible on the area that they're really specialized in, because going forward, we need to contribute, come up with original ideas in whatever we're going into. Much more so. What I'm finding with the artificial intelligence is its purpose is, that first draft of the paper that took you forever in college and grad school?
Yep.
It gets me to that first draft within a couple of hours. And then senior people have to rip it apart and rewrite it and get it polished up so it's ready to go. But it saves all that time to get there.
And it will keep getting better at doing that.
It will get much better at doing that. But the thing is, you have to know, like what I'll tell my kids who I trained in the craft of research, context, problem, solution. They'll come out and they'll get a job and they're saying, I don't know what to do. We have to perform like immediately. I said, you've been trained in this. What's the context? So we'd go through, they'd come back, I got the context. And what's the problem? Same thing. Now, what's the solution? And they go back and forth and they're complaining a lot because they never learned how to use ChatGPT. Then they come out with a report, they bring it to the boss, and every time they say, oh, that's an idea we haven't seen before, let's give that a try. And all the other ones who haven't come up with that contributing idea, they just dismiss them. Those are the ones that lose their jobs. Yeah. So because you've been trained in the craft of research, that allows you to become effective in what you're doing.
Yeah, I would say the single most underutilized resource on a college campus are the librarians.
Oh, Absolutely.
Hands down. Like going in and trying to do a research paper as a grad student with a disability, they were magicians at
Hmm.
pulling data for you. It was wonderful.
One of my mentors, his name is Dr. Guven Yasintas. He grew up in Turkey. The schoolmaster told his parents he should be sweep floors, menial stuff. And his mother said, "I did not give birth to an idiot. Work hard." He's scared as hell. He's working extremely hard. And then for him, it came out when he was in medical school, and the head of the medical school said, "In our graduation ceremony, our top student carries the flag. You're carrying the flag." He had no idea he was.
Yeah, he
Okay.
was just terrified the whole
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
exactly. Remember what I was telling you about controlled frustration? You
Yeah.
put so much pressure on the kid to where it's clinically extremely dangerous, but then the solution does present itself. I went through that all the time.
Richard Reeves wrote about this really eloquently in his Problems of Boys and Men, What's Going On with Them, What to Do About It. He talked about how we are perpetuating the idea that the boy is the problem
Hmm.
in school. They're twice as likely to be suspended, they're much more likely to be contained. And it reinforces this idea that you're supposed to just work hard and figure it out on your own. And no one that's done anything great has done it that way. There is not a single person
Yeah,
who has done anything worthwhile on their own.
exactly. I would have to say that I remember when I was in Scouts, my Scout masters were ex-military.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing again with Tom Russo, he was educated in the way that, officers don't fraternize with enlisted men.
Yeah.
He was there, but he wasn't there. He let us grow, make mistakes. But once we were approaching something where we were going to do something stupid that could have real
He'd step in.
ramifications, he stepped in and we just listened to him. I mean, I was a rebellious little jerk when I was that age, but I just
Sure.
got the sense from him this is not some guy you push that with. All right.
Yeah.
And he got me through to being an eagle. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have
Yeah.
accomplished that.
Well, I think that's another thing that Reeves talked about how I can't remember if it was him or Scott Galloway, but talking about how boys need guardrails.
Right.
Like we need men that we can respect to kind of bounce off as we figure out how to do things.
Hmm.
That try harder myth that we keep throwing on men and boys. We want to stop that. We want to get curious. We want to get resources, and we want to be kind. That's how we help people with this problem.
Exactly. Because I'm just going to tell you what happens with these kids. One of two things generally happens. There's not that much in the middle. They become the most motivated kids you're ever going to meet, or they become shattered as a person.
Yeah.
In which case, they'll need your services until to build them back up so we can start working with them. But I have seen kids that were the most motivated kids you would ever imagine. I mean, I would go like one of the boys. I'm just going to call him Tom. I asked him that last question about the frustration. He said, "Yeah, that's me." What his parents didn't know is he would go to bed early, and he's up in his room studying until 2 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
to be
Mm-hmm.
a low honor roll student. And I
Yeah.
immediately switched him over. Said, "We're going to take 6 months off. All right, we're just going to forget about homework. We're going to focus on this." Then he went back and he was a high honor roll student, putting in an hour and a half a night,
Yeah.
not the typical 6 hours.
I see it all the time with mental health stuff, right? Guys don't come into mental health until their life's on fire for some reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're really bad about going, I'm going to go get help. And so I'll get these calls from guys, like, how do I get my wife to stop leaving me? I'm like, I don't know, man, but come in. Let's see what we can do now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's that myth, it's that story we tell young boys that you just have to try harder, that you're the problem, instead of, hey, what's your normal, kid? Like, how's your mind work? Let's play with it. Let's find out. Let's be curious. Because the minute we do that and you give people the runway and the direction they need, they do amazing things every time. I see it every day at work.
Yeah, and with dyslexia, it's just you need to be more patient. Like this morning, one of my clients, I'm just going to call him John for John Doe, he had to move on to something else, something more
Yeah.
advanced. And his mother was so frustrated that she's literally trying to sit him down to force him to do things. This is a very compliant kid. And for the first time in his life, he's saying no. It took me almost an hour to figure out what the problem was. And I said, okay, let's walk through the solution. And each step, I got his permission. When he said no, I'd say, okay, let's try this. And eventually, what I was telling you, but I was having him on that context stage. I just jumped him up to the problem stage, and he went through.
ready.
And now he's much happier.
Yeah, the right level of challenge is so important. Well, so I wanna respect your time. You've been incredibly kind. I want to ask you the question so that we can learn a little bit more about you and hopefully normalize some things for some guys.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question I have asked everybody is, what's a truth about masculinity you learned before you were 12 that still holds up as true today?
The first thing that I learned, just my father was pretty traditional, a former Marine, is number one, be polite around women and don't swear. And how did that relate? When I was in college, I joined my college cheerleading team, and I was the only guy there. And what I found was being polite, being supportive, taking their problems onto my shoulders, not putting problems on theirs, really helped me in a very short amount of time develop a very deep relationship with them. And just those guys who know when you join a cheer team, you're automatically in the brother friend zone, okay?
Yeah.
Which is a very powerful place to be. But I can tell you when it came to dating their friends, it helped out tremendously because the trust was just right there. All right. But especially what I just found, I said being polite and it's a very traditional view, but I found that most women, even today, where they will curse openly, they feel a lot more polite, a lot better around guys who tend not to do that.
So your behavior, albeit social behavior, can create safety as well.
Yes, it just I found
And that carries.
it. Yeah, and then that carried over that when I was dealing with other boys, I was trying to be more polite, and how has that affected me later in life? Well, as you're aware, correctly so. There's been a lot of gay students coming out of the closet, not being treated horribly anymore, the trans issue, and everything. And even when I was like, I don't really know much about this, but how can I just be polite to everybody? Not how to be kind to everybody. And you know what? It just made people feel a lot better. Even if you don't know much about those particular communities or issues, if you're just polite about things, it just makes everybody feel much better. It's 90% of the way.
100%. I've got a whole video, and I'll link it in the description, about how to show up as a good neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to know everything to not be the asshole. You just need to show up with some kindness, politeness, and some curiosity, and you can only make so big a mistake. It goes a long, long way. So I think that's lovely. I'm glad you got that from your dad.
Well, to give you an example, I just extended that. I had a student who it wasn't cheer, but it was in another sport that was mainly female dominated that he was joining. And there was a trans boy, biological female trans boy, who came in. The kid was just, picked on horribly in school. Mm-hmm. And they were roommates. And he said, okay, what can I do? I don't know really anything about your community. What can I do to make things better? And just that question allowed the trans boy to have a good experience, and he went back to his mom and said, you know what? I was really scared about camp, and this was one of the best experiences I ever had. Mm-hmm. And he said, I didn't know anything about what to do. I was just being nice and asked questions.
No, a little kindness always goes a long way.
Well, kindness and asking, what can I do? Pardon my ignorance. What can I do?
Yeah. And if anybody gets mad at you for that question, they're not a good host. Just leave them be.
Yeah.
I've only had that happen very few times. Is someone mad about you asking, that you should know this thing. The next question on the docket is, tell us about a time where pursuing manhood hurt you.
I can remember when I was on a cheer team in college, and I tried to exhibit the problem when you're on a cheer team in college as the only guy is it makes you hyper masculine.
Yeah, you've got to overperform.
And well, I mean, it's just I reacted to a lot of the girls very traditionally, and most of them appreciate this. I would open up the door for them. I would pull their seat out, and these were my teammates I'm in that pseudo brother role.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the girls, I opened up the door for her. I'm just going to call her Jane to protect her identity. And she was so angry, she said she almost slapped me. She said, "How dare you open the door for me? I can open my own door. I can solve this. I can solve that." And I was like, I went to the captain. I said, "What the heck did I do?" She said, "Well, she's a very strong woman who doesn't want any man doing anything for her." And I was like, "Okay, so what do I do?" And she said, "I don't know." And what I just simply did is I just kind of stood away because to this day, I don't know how to react to women like that when I try to open the doors and pull out the chairs and just be traditionally nice about it. And but I find it's rare. But that was the one time that still just got me. I still don't know what to do with it.
It hurt you. Yeah, that lesson that your father taught you that's been so true and so useful so many places, when it failed you, you didn't know what to do.
I still have absolutely no concept what to do in that situation. I've been into it a few other times. I just backed away. I studied distances in college. I stood at least 6 feet, because within 6 feet is our personal space. I'd back up to at least 9. And I'd say, "I'm sorry, I didn't know what I did to offend you. Pardon my ignorance." And then just take on the additional yelling and try to excuse yourself.
Well, if they're still yelling after that for holding a door, I don't think you really need to tolerate that. Just ignore them and move on with your life.
I just left the scene and got out of the way and moved on.
And whenever it's like that, this is usually somebody hit a breaking point because you're the fifth thing.
Yeah.
That hour.
I'm the straw that broke the back.
Yeah, and so at that point, it's not on you to try to fix because you can't. They're too dysregulated. So you're best just extricating yourself from the situation.
Yes, and I would just get away, and I would assume that somebody in their life would send them to go see a counselor to get things. But it's not something. But it's rare. I'm talking about things that happen maybe once every 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, they don't happen much anymore. I think people are easing off about it. But like the thing that I always try to remember is we look like who hurt them. Yes. Right? As bigger white guys, like if they don't know anything about us other than what we look like, they've got to assume some safety concerns.
Yes.
Right? Unfortunately. And so the minute that something trips and it pings off, it's going to ping off. I'm glad that he didn't let those moments where it hurt you get rid of it entirely. It sounds like it served you in so many other ways so well. I'm glad you never lost it.
Oh, yeah. No, that was the one thing my father drilled into me. I remember when I was 10 and it was time to do dishes, and he didn't like how I did dishes, so he dumped them into the sink and showed me how to redo them until I did it right.
Yeah.
Okay. And to this day, I will go over to friends' places, Thanksgiving dinner, at a friend's place, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, there's a big pile of dishes with my name on it."
I got it. Check. I can do that. Well, the last question I always ask, we always want to go out on a high note. Tell us about a time pursuing your manhood empowered you.
It was when I had to do the last push for my Eagle Scout. I was the last rank right before Eagle when I was late 13. I didn't finish up until I was almost 17. I was literally doing a merit badger weekend. And that final push crossed the line. So then I was 18, and I was like, because I was held back a year because I was dyslexic. And I was like, okay, so I got my Eagle, big whoop. Well, then I found out it was a big deal. That's when I found out I could get the nomination for West Point. That's when I found out that when I started applying for internships that nobody could get, I said, well, I'm an Eagle. Oh, you got the job. That was it. And it was a big deal through my mid-20s. When there was a position that I wanted right out of college, I mentioned that I was an Eagle. The guy said, I tried to do it. I got to start. I just couldn't finish. You did it. You're hired. So I would have to say that was the biggest one.
Oh, man, thanks for doing what you do. And very sincerely, please let me know if there's anything that I can do to support your work going forward.
Okay. Fantastic. It was great being on the podcast.
And that's our conversation with Russell. Just a few things to kind of fact check and clean up some nuance. Russell's program reports outstanding numbers. The average for people getting the right help is about a single grade level. This isn't me detracting from anything that Russell's doing or what he's saying. We just can't get to those numbers, and it's not like an academic study. This is his experience after his many years of helping folks. Not all programs are going to be created equal, but that doesn't mean those tools aren't going to be incredibly helpful for whoever needs them. The next thing that needs nuance is the 95% number of students not getting what they need for the problem. While I believe that number to be accurate, it's not supported by academic research. It's an estimation by people who are in the field as advocates, educators, etc. So I want to be really clear. That's from people within the field. It's not an academically rigored number. Now that we have those out of the way, I hope that you took as much as I did on how to help find out who's got this problem and who's suffering with dyslexia with the wrong tools. I really sincerely hope that you took the direction from the beginning and really thought about whether it's you or someone you love and what they might need differently. I know when I think about this, I get so upset at the kid that I was and how untended to he was. I just imagine what my childhood and early education might have been like if I thought of myself as someone who was smart instead of someone who just wasn't trying hard enough. I hope that this helps you bust that myth and helps you bring it to some people in your life. Leave a comment and give me a message. Let me know which of these tools is going to be most impactful for you. I'd love to hear your story about it. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week when we talk about the stories men tell. Take care.